Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about virtual and media production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Super Bowl commercials. What did we see? What did we like? What did we notice? We're going to talk about that in the second hour. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the graphics in the Super Bowl, kind of break them down. That's a new graphics package from NBC. So we'll take a look at what we like and don't like and what worked and didn't work. So we'll do that tomorrow. And then on Thursday, Blair Anderson Metalsmith is joining us. And Blair is a master metalsmith, and she's going to be talking about her art and how she works it. So she's going to talk about that on Thursday. And then Friday, we're going to give you an Office Hours update. Friday may be the last Office Hours 1.0. We're hoping. So we're very, very close, and we'll give you an update on that. And then, of course, on Saturday, it's education 8 to 10. We don't put that on YouTube. Laura Thompson will be joining us at 10 o'clock, which we will put back on YouTube to talk about accessibility in the classroom. Then, of course, Sunday is our more philosophical, what are we doing here kind of conversation that we have here. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, take it away.
Thank you. Douglas Carmichael is up first this morning. He says, what Waves SoundGrid-capable audio interfaces would you recommend in the $3,000 to $4,000 US range, with DiGiGrid IOX being $3,199 for 12 inputs? I'd be looking for better value for money.
I don't know. It's not. I think the problem is there's not a lot of us that are using Waves. For whatever reason. I mean, it's a good package. I've seen it used in a lot of places. It's just we just don't have a lot of experience with it. We're either kind of using Pro Tools and Logic, or we're using other hardware. It kind of sits in an in-between. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it looks like Douglas is leaning towards using some SoundGrid capable system. Yep. And it's not my number one choice for a backup system that does real time.
Yep. Next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida, and he says, live streaming service contracts. How can REMI workers protect themselves against financial responsibility for internet issues?
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm very curious about this answer. The other day, my Comcast had a big outage in the Bay Area. I think I sent you a message about it, Alex. And I was down for, I think, 6.5 hours. Nothing to do. And it was super, super frustrating. And I get it. You know, I should probably have multiple backups. And, you know, as it turned out, I did a little bit of work over my phone as a hotspot. But, you know, we're dealing with bigger files than that. The financial responsibility, I don't know what the answer is, except for backups and backups.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a fine print on a contract that you might send out in a quote of just like, you know, but you might want to establish what your rules. There are a couple things that REMI workers really need to consider. One is 2 separate internet connections, preferably completely separate types. So a wireless versus a wired, or microwave versus, you know, or a couple different ones. When we needed to do events, I go to the office to do them. I don't do them out of my house because I'm not sure if I can pull it off. So I go to the office where we have two 1 gig connections into the building, and so that are, you know, business class, you know, connections. But even then, on most of our major events, we have generators, and that's another thing you should know, that you're going to have UPS and/or generators that are going to be able to power you if you lose power. I mean, I think that this is something that's going to fall on the person who wants to work at home. They need to make sure that they're accountable for at least a primary backup, at least backup for their power. You know, those are the kind of things that they just have to have. As a producer, and John Preto has talked about it a little bit in the past, is, you know, you want to build a system that lets you jump from one person to another as well. So building that into the process, it's a little bit on the producer side. But if you're a REMI person, beyond the financial impact of what they might do if things don't work, if you disappear because your internet went out, chances of a producer coming back to you is low. so you should treat it. You know, that's the bigger problem, is mostly that your reputation gets impacted.
So, Alex, speaking of backups, how was your Starlink experiment?
My Starlink experiment is still ongoing. There is some occlusion. It turns out there can't be any occlusion. Like, that Starlink needs to see the whole sky. You know, it can't be just pointing some direction. So there's an occlusion that like my roof, because I have it on the deck. And so it is. So I got to find another place for it to test it further. But right now, even the Starlink tells me you'll have a problem every 55 seconds with the occlusion. They're like, you have an occlusion. You should expect a cease in transmission. And that's what I was noticing. I was like, oh, it just dies every once in a while. And so I'm going to move it and do some more testing on it. I'm also going to start taking it. I'm working on a system to let me.
You're going to mount it on your car, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm not going to have it on a car, but I want to build a mobile streaming system. So I use one of the links along with the Starlink, along with, so that I can have this little like self-contained system that we can go somewhere in the middle of nowhere and just set it down and go, and I think I'm kind of excited about that opportunity because I think it could be really interesting to, go to Tennessee Valley or go to Mount Tam and be able to stream from it. There's a lot, it should be, I'm also going to test what the radius is, but I would not consider Starlink at this point a backup to my main internet. It's definitely still proof of concept. The microwave would probably be what I would use next, to make that work. Cause that's the only other thing I have. And that's what and I did have that when I was doing productions out of my house before we had the office. I had both Comcast as well as a microwave link to drop to. Go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to add that I think that backup for events, particularly where paid events, registrations, all of that, I think that having communication and multiple communication contact details for the registrants is really important, so that you can always have different services that fall down. But if you can have a backup and then you can just say, hey, everyone, we're going over here now because this has fallen over. Telegram and things like that is great for that because you can just have a, push out only. It's not no chatter. It's just push to everyone. That can work really well. And so,
and that comes back to building communities around your content as opposed to a singular event. Because when you start building event, doing something every day, like we react to all kinds of things. I've felt, dropped off. The host has dropped off the show and the show just keeps going, because, but that's something you build over time, not something you do for a single event. And I think that that's the thing is building a culture around your content as opposed to trying to do it as a singular piece. It takes a lot of pressure off of those. And it makes the audience, also you've built up a relationship with them when they only show up once and it doesn't work. They only have a sample of, I showed up once and it didn't work. That's 100% failure. If they're having meetings with you all the time and they show up for something that's a little bit bigger, they now have 90 samples and one sample went bad. It's a very different view for, they'll give you, especially if you're, giving them great content, they'll give you some room, to make errors. And I still think that's part of why building those communities is important. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis has a fun one. What movie have you seen the most and how many times have you seen it?
Fenwick.
The American President.
Really?
Yeah, love that movie.
Interesting.
It's a great movie. When it was on cable, it's 15 years ago or whatever. If I'm flicking through the channels and all of a sudden it was there, I set the remote down and I don't care where I was, I'd watch it out till the end. Even to the last line of dialogue. It's a Sorkin script, so it feels very Sorkin-y. It's got all those Sorkinisms in it that bug you.
He just writes the same thing over and over again. Like that's the problem.
No, he doesn't. He copies and pastes. That's different than writing it over and over again.
Yeah, but they're walking while they're doing it. Okay, totally different.
Do a lot of walk and talks. So and I'll say the thing that gets me the most is it's a great love story. Mm-hmm. And right up until the end, I'll spoiler, here we go, plug ears if you don't want to hear it. The whole movie, the president keeps trying to buy Annette Bening roses. Like he was trying to get her flower. And it's comical. It's comical. He calls and he goes, yeah, I'm the president. I want to buy. No, you're not. It's very funny. And then in the end, when he finally patches the relationship and he's going to the State of the Union and she's his date, like that's a gangster move right there if you want to impress a woman. And he hands her this giant, 24 red roses. And she goes, where did you get the roses? And he goes, as it turns out, I have a rose garden. And he's like this almost
Great
accidental
payoff.
president. He doesn't know all that. Anyway, I love that movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Good, Joshua.
Yeah, for me, it's A Man for All Seasons, 1966.
It's a good movie.
Amazing.
Good movie. Yeah, it's a really. I don't think it's not my most seen, but I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. It's really, really good. Courtney.
Well, Shawshank Redemption is very high on my list.
Oh, yeah.
If I see it online, I almost always switch to it. It's an incredible example of storytelling in a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And for a prison movie, every time I watch it, I'll look at something different. The cinematography, the carefulness of the arrangement of each individual shot adds to the emotion of what is being said or what is being talked about in voiceover, and the voiceover is tremendous. And Frank Darabont, who directed it, is a very, very meticulous director. And if you want to see how important it is to him, every single shot is search for the emails, that trove of emails that was hacked from Sony. There were a bunch of internal emails over Walking Dead, which he was a showrunner on originally.
Right.
And incredible insight into his persona about his direction in the emails. They were just hilarious to read.
No, I'll definitely look for that. Go ahead, Jason.
It's a wonderful pick, and in fact, it was going to be mine. So I'll offer 2 in turn. As a kid, I didn't have cable as a kid, and I did not have a lot of VHS tapes. So the ones that I had, I watched a lot. A River Runs Through It and The Sting.
Oh, very good ones. I just watched The River Runs Through It a couple weeks ago. I hadn't seen it for probably 25 years, and it's good. Now go ahead, Peter.
I'll offer 2 up. I can't believe the first one. The one I've seen the most through 65 years of life is Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, interesting.
Well, think about it. I mean, in university, every Friday night, late night, right?
I have to admit,
I mean, that was a no-brainer. It said, what you've seen the most. My favorite movie is Patton.
Oh, that's good. That's a good movie. Yeah. I think I've only seen Rocky Horror Picture Show about half. Like I just wasn't.
I was about to say I never finished it.
But it was a huge thing. All my friends went to see it every Friday night. You're right, Bill.
I generally don't redo and re-see movies, but the one I've probably seen about 5 times at this point is Fifth Element, just because I wasn't expecting it when I sat down to it. I knew nothing about it. And there are so many little different colors in that movie of like, this is going to be broad, this is going to be romantic, this is going to be just insane, this is going to be sci-fi-ish. And you can poke plot holes in it, but I think it's fun all the way from the first frame to the last.
we say a lot of multipass. Anyway,
multipass.
Grant.
There's not many movies I can really enjoy a movie and then I can't watch it again, particularly the ones that are, like Castaway is a good example of a movie that's just painful to watch, right? But it's a great movie. Right. But the ones I can just watch over and over are Oceans 11, 12, 13, all of those heist movies, awesome actors that are just casually cruising through their acting. You know what I mean? They're just having fun. Yeah. And then of course all because of the tech in there, and then a good heist movie set in Vegas, you love it. It's all good.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Wizard of Oz. It doesn't get any scarier than flying monkeys.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I've got to add one more that I recently watched again after a very long time, and what was impressed by both the prescience and also how dated it was. Sneakers.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to think of this. I don't know how many times I've watched certain movies, so I just don't know. Like, I think that the one that probably is the most is now, and then I just literally just went out of my head. Like I watched it more times than ever. Usual Suspects. I probably watched 50 times, and that was because I had the VHS tape when I was at Lucasfilm, and it was just in my thing. I never come home from work and watch it again. And so, but then otherwise, Wizard of Oz, It's a Wonderful Life, just because we watch it every year. I've watched it probably every year for I don't know how long. And then I watch a lot of, the Ocean's 11 is easy, Born Identity, and a lot of I have a tendency to watch a lot of You Messed with the Wrong Person movies. So Man on Fire, Braveheart, that type of thing. Except Braveheart, I just got the first 40 minutes out because in the first act, you don't need to see again. You can I know what happened. So I just wait until he comes to the village. So anyway, after that, it's a great movie. All right, next question. And then, by the way, for our producers, see, this is what happens when we don't have a lot of questions. We just mull over it. All right, next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, has the panel recommendations about PC-based documentation systems for how-tos in different data formats. And he mentions PDF, XLR, audio, video. Any ready-to-use products or databases in this area?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know if XLR is a, maybe means XML. Maybe it was just a typo.
I just read
a database format. But hey, who knows? Maybe there is such a thing. For creating documentation for programs I've written, I don't use a canned other than Microsoft Word. I use Microsoft Word. I lay it out with illustrations and screen grabs and each topic, each header. For each section has a header, and I just designated a header, and then Word can create a bookmark list, and then at the end I output it as a PDF with bookmarks, and then anybody can then just bring up that PDF as an instruction sheet to read the operation manual for whatever it is, and just go through the topics and click on a topic in the outline view or the bookmark view and jump immediately to that section. And it creates a nice little booklet that you can print out as well if if people ever remembered what paper is. So I use Microsoft Word.
Go ahead, Jason.
I think XML is far and away the most extensible and flexible way of doing this, because it allows you to kind of add to the documentation and then pour it into any template that you need. If you wanted a PDF, no problem. Into a wiki, no problem. It's designed for exactly and only that.
Grant.
I was just going to say Pages, and I tell you the reason I use Pages is the ease of dragging in PDFs, right? So a PDF can come straight in and you can crop it and then you can scale it, and it works beautifully. And I just haven't found that to work as well in Word as it does in Pages. You can drag it around, put it wherever, and manipulate it like it's an image, but it's a PDF.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, I spent quite a long time in Word, like entirely too long. And I think the constraint was PC. I adore Pages. I think it is exactly the right mix of beautiful and functional. And if it's not there, it's probably not necessary. That's what I really like about it.
Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis comes up next. This time he says, what do you think are the best uses of the Shure SM57?
Go ahead, Grant.
So I would use them firstly on a drum kit, right? So pointing down at a snare, I can push it up, have it underneath the snare as well, do top and bottom, across the toms, all of that. 57s, just you can use them all over the place. The other thing is horn sections. Sometimes we've even made plastic shields to put around the 57 at the end, and then the horn can, like trumpets, trombones, all of that can blow straight into it, and that'll cut some of the slap that you get going into the audience as well, and you can kind of get a great sound. So 57s, you can use them all over the place. Piano as well, put them in the back of a upright piano, sounds great.
Mitchell?
Yeah, the SM57 works best as a microphone, but when you're not using it for that, when you're in a noisy environment, it's got the best off-access rejection of any dynamic mic I've seen.
Better than the 58?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, the 57 is the basis of the 58. In fact, any Shure capsule microphone like dynamic microphone starts with the 57. If you unscrewed the grill, you technically have a 57. With that said, it's great for putting right up against a speaker like a guitar amp or something like that, putting it kind of off access so it can capture that snare drum, as Grant said, is a great way to do that. Anything, congas are perfect for 57s, and yeah, you can definitely use them as vocals if you want to put like a pop filter and try to have a little bit less interference in between your voice and the microphone.
Go ahead, Chris.
My favorite place for the 57 is on the bottom of the snare, and for the top of the snare, I like a AKG 414 at about a 45-degree angle, just hanging over the rim. Gives you the crack, and then you take the other one, put it out of phase, make it and makes it really fat.
Next question.
Simon Sandir, it looks like, in India, says looking to get a Wi-Fi 6 router. Please suggest a good one. Thanks.
Go ahead, Joshua.
All right, I use the Linksys Velop tri-band mesh. It's Wi-Fi 6 HomeKit enabled, and it works really well for me.
Go ahead, Peter.
I use the Aero 6 Pro 3-station throughout the house. One thing to be aware of, and we've talked about enough here, is I use it only for my portable devices. This is hardwired into the system, right? I don't use the Wi-Fi router for anything other than my phones or my iPad and smart devices.
Go ahead, John.
There's two classes of access points. There's the enterprise class, and then there's home class, commercial or consumer grade Wi-Fis. And I wouldn't buy a Wi-Fi 6 router. I'd buy a Wi-Fi 6E router. It has the extended bandwidth up in the 6 gigahertz range. There's 7 additional 160 megahertz channels up there, so you got less interference. And on the enterprise side, Ubiquiti or Aruba or Ruckus or Cisco are all great brands.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm with Peter. I like the Netgear Orbi 6. It's the best implementation of mesh I've seen for use in a home.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, second to what Preto said, the 6E is very important, especially if you're going to do any type of streaming, any type of Zoom calls. It's got the OFDMA, which is orthogonal frequency division multiple access, and that's what gives it a faster switch back and forth between the router and the computer. So exactly. I use a Netgear RAX router. I know that D-Link also makes those on the commercial side.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. He says, with the supply chain issues constraining the supply of new Macs, what Apple resellers have you had the best luck with in terms of availability?
Jason.
Apple is the very best in the world at fulfilling their own demand. And if they are delayed, you are not going to find a reseller to do it more quickly than Apple.
I have to admit that I will not buy from anyone other than Apple at this point. Like, I only buy Apple products from Apple because the Apple Care, all the other bits and pieces, it's just way easier to buy it from Apple than it is from anyone else. And the price doesn't change very much. Go ahead, Chris.
Wasn't Tim Cook's first job at Apple managing the supply chain stuff?
Yeah, he's good at it.
I don't know that there really, is there a supply chain problem with the Apple product?
There is. I mean, they have supply chain problems just because they can't make as many as everyone wants. So they have, that things get backed up. They can't, they I think they said in the last quarter that they lost $6 billion on the fact that they still made a record for that quarter, but they made $6 billion less because they couldn't fulfill the demand. So they're having some pinch, but definitely not the same pinch because they're the biggest game in town. So they can tell a factory, we get all the first ones, and then everybody else can, that's part of. I knew a manufacturer, it's a pretty big manufacturer, that could not release a product because they shared a chip with the iPhone. And they said we just can't get that chip. it's just on it. As Apple gets them all, that one chip, and so that was they had to redesign it to not use that chip because otherwise they'd never be able to release a product, and they learned not to share. And Apple will soon not share anything because they're going to build all. This is there's going to be some point where the iPhone is like one big chip that's inside. I think that's the direction that they're going. But yeah. It's just a pain. I've tried. I bought from the AT&T store. I bought from Amazon, and all of it has always been a pain. Apple, I buy an iMac. If I buy Mac Mini right now, it will be at my house by 11 a.m. I'm not going to do it. I don't need it right now.
They're not constrained though. That's the other thing. If you get
they're not any more constrained than any other.
It's going to be 6 weeks.
They're not any more constrained than there's no reseller that's going to get it to you faster than they will. That's the bottom line. Next question.
Michael Weber is up next from Foxborough, Massachusetts, and he says, building a new control room currently. Everything is set up on 4 folding tables, seeking recommendations for reasonably priced furniture that works well in control rooms, ideally with power and cable management, and an overbridge might be helpful.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't know about reasonably priced, but Winstead has always been famous for workstations. They do a lot of stuff for NASA, and they have this everything view View workstation, which has this wonderful little monitor bridge in here, and it routes cables, manages cables. They also do the consoles with rack mounts below, so that you can put equipment, down underneath into 19-inch racks and so on. But they're a bit pricey.
Go ahead, Grant.
I've just done a change in here, and I mean, I just got IKEA tables, and they've got the adjustable legs on them, and so I could set them all the same. But my biggest tip is I've really loved putting all the active gear next door, like outside of this room, and it's worked really well. And my tip is getting little USB 3 hubs with the square, whatever that is, the USB 3A type, or the, what is that, B type, I guess it is. And then you can get I get a what is that, a 5 meter, which is whatever that is. What is that?
About 15 feet.
15 feet, yeah. And I get a 15 foot cable, and that's worked really awesome. So now it's just a bunch of monitors and a couple of keyboards and those extensions for USB and some HDMI cables going next door, and it's beautifully quiet in here, and it doesn't get hot and all of that. I can't recommend that enough if there's a way of doing it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So while I was at CES, I saw a lot of gaming battle stations and things like that. Razer came out with one, Glitch, which was I can't think of the company that's supporting them. These are all built-in. Put your stuff inside the desk, and they're all foldable, and they're all adjustable. And all I could think about is these probably make good production desks for audio visual guys. There's even one. There was a full sit stand desk that went up to 7 feet, so you could do what you needed to do, and in whether sitting or standing.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would agree. I think, Courtney, the Weinstead desks, calling it a bit pricey is kind of an understatement. Those things can be like as much as a used car. And I have to think that their business really suffered with the advent of LED screens and LCD screens, because their claim to fame was you could put a couple £100 of monitors up at the top of them. I would definitely look at some IKEA stuff. I'm also going to throw out another kind of a weird option. Milwaukee makes a product called Packout, and it is designed for construction sites to carry all your tools around. They have a bazillion different Packout options, some of which have drawers. You could actually take and make 2 towers of Packout drawers, and then they have this really cool interlocking system where you can lock stuff together, and you can buy the feet and actually receptacles separately. You could mount the feet to, Alex, we were talking about using a butcher block for you. You could actually mount the feet to the bottom of the butcher block, line those 2 things up and go click, and it all locks together. It's almost like Lego for furniture. It's kind of a neat thing. I've been looking into it for another project, and super interesting.
Yeah, for a studio, I would recommend thinking about 80/20. Like that's what studios are built on. that's the 80/20 is the adult erector set, and for big stuff. And the company that we use to do the 80/20 is a company called Cabinet Works out of Ohio. And I send them a rough SketchUp, like literally boxes of what I want, and then they send me back a CAD drawing, what they add to it is the wood, to make the tabletop or whatever. That's something you could do if you have any skill set. You can build the whole thing in 80/20 and then drop a piece down. The thing you want to look at are, do you want turrets? Turrets they're kind of at an angle. And they're going to have a couple, maybe 4U of things that you can put in there. So that's what we call it. And they kind of go at a 45-degree angle into the table. And so the turret you build, oftentimes in most studios, we have like rows of turrets. One of the things that in the most recent studios that I've designed, I try to build it so that I can have one person run it or a whole bunch of people run it. So if you think about it like this, I'll have one piece here, and then I'll have another section here and another section here. All of these are on wheels, or at least these wings. So this might be my audio desk, video, let's say Zoom over here. And now if I have, and I then these get umbilical cords between them. The main thing is if it's a big show, you swing them out and you have other people join you. And if it's a small show, you swing them in and you have people, you can reach over and grab onto stuff. So that's something to think about as far as instead of having it permanent, you have it kind of adjustable so that you can do a big show or a small show. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Harshid in Central Florida. And Harshid says, when it comes to offsite locations of machines and so forth, would an approach of building a studio in another country aside the USA be something that would be feasible choices or be a feasible choice in the sense of cost and price?
I think that, I guess the question, you can definitely build studios. One of the things we think about less in cost, but more in coverage, so eventually we're going to end up building probably a control room somewhere in Europe, either in the UK or Switzerland or something, Australia, and then here, and then that gives you 24-hour. Now right now we can just contract with people to do that. But if we wanted to actually build that studio up, those are the kind of places that we would look so that you could have 24/7 coverage. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just think there's always also that thing, if you're going to do something off your location, you're going to have to outsource at least some labor cost for those odd cases when something just needs a physical reset or it needs a repatch or something like that. So I just put that into the mix. If you're not co-locating something, you're going to have to figure out the human cost of running that asset, not just the physical cost of buying it and depreciating it. So it's just something to think about.
The hardest thing in a lot of other countries is just getting it there and getting the same equipment that you had here there. If you have to, sometimes it's not available there, and then you have to ship it, and then you have to pay incredible customs to move it in. So you have to kind of think about any kind of move like that as long term. I know that we've really had issues with places like India of like the getting stuff into India has been a thing. So now these are for local productions that are just taking care of that country. So we're not sending anything to them, but it's an issue. Next question.
Don Lewis in Inman, South Carolina says, my Behringer X32 audio console just arrived. My audio gain should be much better next time on the panel. Is there any input from the panelists on this console?
Go ahead, Jason.
I've been blown away by my X32. My advice, so there are many complicated things that you can kind of go down, many rat holes. I've never seen gain be one of them. I would put it in solo and just get your gain right. I mean, there's an incredibly accurate meter right there at the top.
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I love my X32. I would get super familiar with the software, and one thing to double check or just get your head around is routing. So it's really interesting when you start messing around with user inputs and being able to change the different inputs and outputs, and then you can get yourself into a real problem loop. When you've changed something on the outputs as well as the outs here, and rerouting. But I don't know if you have already, but adding a Dante card is next level. Like that takes this whole thing to a beautiful place. Being able to, I've got all my computers that run in here and ins and outs, and yeah, it's awesome. So congratulations.
And sometimes the Dante card goes from being available tomorrow to being available in 3 months. So order now, like you want one. Like if you have an X32, you want a Dante card. so just go get it. All right, it really transforms the thing into kind of your studio engine. I will say that after all these years and all the people that I know using them, I think it's probably the best cost, best ROI on a mixer is the X32. There are definitely mixers that are have more features, have a lot of other things, like a QL1 is the next one up for us. And then we usually jump to QL5 or CL5. And then after that, it's like a CalRec usually shows up. And then there's the XR18 going down the other direction as far as kind of full featured mixers. But I will say that the X32, Behringer really just found a sweet spot and nailed it. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next. He says, what is a recommended way to soundproof a vehicle similar to a Sprinter van for production usage?
Go, Jason.
I would start with Dynamat or a Dynamat clone, and then treat as needed afterwards. It's expensive and it's tedious, but it works pretty well.
Go ahead, Chris.
The trick is to start at the very beginning, at the bare metal. If you go on YouTube and search for like van life, DIY, van conversion type stuff, you start by, there's this really heavy stuff that you cut into squares and you tape it up to the, you don't tape it, it's adhesive. And then it's about 3 layers to get a comfortable box to live in. And a comfortable box to live in would also be a comfortable box to make a production office or, studio.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, besides the sound absorption stuff that people have mentioned so far, one thing I would probably do is take it to a company that does spray-on bed liners for pickup trucks and have them spray the entire inside with that thick polyurethane plastic bed liner, and that will adhere to the sheet metal and prevent it from resonating, and it can change the whole resonance of the vehicle and stop a lot of sound coming in from the outside, and then apply your sound reflecting, absorbing stuff on the inside of that.
Go ahead, Bill.
To take you in a different direction mentally, if your goal is soundproofing, remember soundproofing means you want to cut off all access to the outside, and that means you're going to have an extra issue with airflow inside, particularly if you're working inside of it. If you make it truly soundproof and have cut off every access to the outside, then if you don't have some system for bringing filtered air into while you're working in there, and you try to work a 2-hour show inside something, it's going to be viciously uncomfortable. So whatever you have to do in baffled fans or something like that to provide quiet airflow would be pretty important, I would think.
Yeah. Our experience has been, we've done a little bit in Sprinter vans. Our experience is box trucks are much easier. If you're okay with the height of a box truck, if you don't have to take it into a parking area that has a low entrance, that a box truck is easier to soundproof. Your friend is air. Like you need to build a 6-inch gap or an 8-inch gap between you and the outside world. That's going to make it, obviously it's not going to work while it's moving, but it will cut off a lot of the, it's just sound waves just don't make through it. Then there's all the layering and matting that you might put around that air gap, but an air gap, sealed air gap, will go a long way to cutting off the sound from the outside. 6 to 8 inches is typically a good number to think about. Another one that we've done it with is like a toy hauler mobile home or whatever. Like, I don't know what they call them, but they have a toy hauler on the back. It's like, but the nice thing is it expands out, so you can turn it into a real big office. And in that back section where you would have put a car or whatever into it, that's where you build your studio. And so that's another place that's been really effective, because then you have all your gear and everything else, and there's almost like a little green room and everything else. And there's a company that does that. I haven't had to build that out. We've just used it, and it's super effective. That's the best solution in my opinion to doing that. But the truck has been nice just because unmarked truck, you open it up, drive it around. We had to do some things with it. So it was really useful. Next question.
Next one comes from Rick Timkovich in northern Colorado, and he says, my studio setup consists of a Lastolite gray backdrop. I'd like to add some color on it like several of the panelists do. Suggestions on how to do that? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I took my approach the same way TJ did way back when, is I have a Hue light bulb in a clamp-on light fixture sitting right behind me, and that I could change the color. Now I have to be careful which color I pick, because sometimes banding shows up and sometimes banding does not. So blue doesn't band, but a white light will band. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, not enough stair steps. There's not enough bits to describe the transition.
Right. I could do it live here and show you what I mean. Now it's banding.
Right.
Right.
It just has to do with the different color channels not being able to represent the transition.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But now I could change it to blue or green and it's fine.
Good, Bill.
For saturated backgrounds, for me, the two things you have to control, first of all, you have to control ambient light. You have to kill all of what sneaks into your space, because the higher the overall level, the less saturated color you get. So if you've got a window that's not fully blocked or anything else that's providing full spectrum white light, you're going to have trouble getting a really saturated background. The other thing is that once you do that and control and turn all off the light and have some colored lights in the background, the light on your subject needs to be controlled. And that usually means using things like, whether it's barn doors or a grid or something, so you don't get spill, because what kills the background light is when the light on the subject is splashing off into the background and lowering that richness of the lights behind the person. So that's why I have a large softbox above with a grid on it. These small lights are really close and they're turned down really low, so they're not reaching the background. Mm-hmm. And if I were to turn off those three, I would be Tony the Tiger with nothing on me.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I like to use a semi-gray background. I think you're heading in the right direction because it's going to take the light. And if you look over this shoulder, I've got a hanging curtain behind me, and here's a better shot of it. And I'm lighting it with a LED Go. It could be anything that's a long light source like that. And it's lighting it up perfectly fine. It's very saturated because it's a darker color.
Yep. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I use just these cheap, inexpensive way to go. These Wi-Fi controllable bulbs. They do not only do they do a good warm white or a cool white, but they're controllable to any color. They come with an app, and you can even control them with Google Home or an Alexa. And just shout out what color you want. It'll change the background color, and I have them just plugged into extensions that hold a standard socket.
Yeah, I use at home. I have a Nanlite mixed panel 60, which is probably very big overkill, but it's just what I had. I'd swapped some stuff out in the studio, and so it works. I think it works really well. On the road, I use the Nanlite 6C. 2, I think, is the one that I use there for uplighting. I also use the Aperture 7C that I replace the fixtures in my hotel room with if I want to change the color there for that color. But I think that you probably find that the 6C or a couple of them would probably do a pretty good job as well. Next question.
Next one comes from Joseph Mueller of Ontario, Canada. He says, panelists have been looking for microphone mute devices. The MixPre has a built-in mute function. What about plugging a programmable keypad into the MixPre USB 3 port and send the mute channel keyboard control sequence? Yes?
I don't know. I don't know what the keyboard shortcut is for it. Or I'm actually not familiar with that feature. So we'll have to do some research into the MixPre feature. I like real hardware that just does one thing. So I have a tendency to do it that way. We're going to jump pretty quickly, Bill.
Yeah, just all I was saying is that the key reason I use an outboard is the tactile. I need to be able to rest my finger on the button and know for sure whether it's engaged or disengaged.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like about, I have a Studio Technologies 205 and I have a light. When I click on it, it doesn't always, if I tap it the wrong way or I hit it too hard, it doesn't always switch, but it doesn't just change the light either. So it doesn't happen anymore because I know how to hit it, but I've learned how to properly make it work. Go ahead, Chris.
I would say the same thing about my Stream Deck. I know how to properly hit it. The Korg nano controller that I use with my MixPre, besides having faders and gain knobs and record and stop and everything, also has a mute per channel. So there's a physical button there.
Courtney?
I don't know very many devices that can generate keyboard keystrokes outside of the computer, which is what you'd need to do to send it to the USB pre and have it look like a keyboard. So
I think it'd have to be a keyboard, or something like a keyboard. The next question.
Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland says, I thought I saw Alex holding up a small parabolic mic situation during the Super Bowl. What was that?
This is a little one. This is sent to me, and I haven't. I'm looking for I have to go spelunking in my garage to get the proper lav to put in it. This is designed to work with a lavalier. This is soundsharkaudio.com, and this is the very smallest version of what we were talking about it, because this is what, a larger version of this is typically used in a lot of football games to pick up people talking. And so I'm excited. I've had it for a little while, and I admit that it's been one of those things like, I got to go through the garage and find the right lav to put it in. But it's a really cool little one, and it has a cold shoe mount. Next question.
Next one comes from Sam Greenwood in Toronto, and Sam says, what are the panel's opinions on the production of the Olympics so far, be it your local broadcaster and or the international feeds?
We are going to talk about that next week. So we'll talk about it. We can give it a little opinion, but we're going to do the same thing we're doing with the Super Bowl next week for the Olympics. But go ahead, Chris. What's your overall opinion?
I think the biggest problem with the Olympics is the marketing, because I haven't seen anything about it, haven't watched a frame of it.
I think the hardest part for me with the Olympics is all the stories that they put into that NBC puts into the thing, and the fact that I think what ruined it for me was I talked to someone who was competing who competed in the Olympics recently, and they just talked about how much they hate those. Like they just hate the process, and knowing that they hated it and seeing NBC do it has been it makes it very hard for me to watch. like watch it because I just feel like they're torturing them for money.
Dirty.
Yeah, it does. It just makes me feel like they're torturing the athletes for money, and it just they are, and that's and I think that's why Simone Biles had issues and everything else. I think people are having issues because they're putting so much pressure on them by trying to get into all these personal things with them and not letting them just be athletes, and I think that I think it's a mistake, and I think that they need to pull back. Bill, real quick.
Real quick, I just think everything has changed about the Olympics, and it's changed because of the instantaneous nature of the connection to the world. This stuff is happening while we're all sleeping or at weird times, and that information gets disseminated across the world. So everybody knows who's winning and losing well in advance of watching anything live. I don't think anybody's watching live. We're all used to time shifting. All of those things conspire to make it harder and harder to have those breakthrough stories where you're watching with intense anticipation as does this person win or not win? Oh my gosh, right up to the last second, that's all gone.
I think the every 2 years was devastating too. Like it not being around for 4 years and not hearing about it, and then it coming up, what made it much more important. The every 2 year thing, I think, is kind of a disaster. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez, Bellingham, Washington. What's your favorite connector and why? Mine's the BNC. The elegance of its simplicity, the security of knowing it won't come off, the sound of the snap as it locks on, even the gradual curve of the groove. And it can serve as a fidget spinner.
Go ahead. Relatively quick. We're going to try to get through these questions. Go ahead, Mitchell.
XLRs. I like them because they push in, click, and I've never had one pop out on its own.
And go ahead, Jason.
BNC is a wonderful choice, but I've got to go with SMPTE Fiber. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you've mentioned my favorites, but Speakon is a good close-up from No Trick because they can do multiple wires. They're really hard plastic. They have a locking connector, and they're big enough to be able to solder to, unlike Fisher connectors and Limo connectors.
Oh no, not the Limo. All right, next question.
Sam Greenwood in Toronto says, what mic would you use to mic up a stage to capture people who aren't individually mic'd?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
This is one of the toughest challenges. A stage full of people not being able to get individuals. You don't often this is done in amateur theater. We don't know how well people project. It's a little easier in professional where they all know how to act and be big if they need to. But that said, most people that I've seen use choir mics, which is a condenser that is pretty sensitive, usually from the grid overhead of the stage full of people. But you always have the issue of a mic that's close to a person in center stage is going to be far off access for somebody who's in the right stage wings, and that just goes on and on. So you have to have multiple mics to try to cover the thing, and it's never going to be perfect.
Grant?
Yeah, I know you weren't saying about singing necessarily, but it's very similar. Like Bill was saying about with choirs, seeing overhead mics, it's not great. And I'm seeing more and more now where choirs all have a 58 and every one of them are holding a 58, and it sounds awesome. But I have used with some success some boundary mics on the stage. As long as they're not moving around a lot, you can pick up some decent sound from that, but nothing beats a nice close mic.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've used PZM microphones like he was just talking about there. Grant was talking about pressures on microphones like that. But you have to worry about if they're dancing, not a good choice because it's mounted on the stage. In that case, I'd go with multiple overhead supercardioids like 416s pointed at zones and then an auto mix to follow the people that are mixing online. So it takes the other ones down and only brings up the one that's in the field where the most sound is coming from.
Let's go to the next question.
Mark Fischel in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What Mac app can I use to edit .ai files if I don't have Adobe Illustrator?
Go, Jason.
Nothing is a one-shot deal. Nothing works perfectly all the time for every Illustrator file. But I would say Affinity Designer or Inkscape are your two best bets.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was totally shocked. I didn't think anything could open up an Illustrator file. I was going to say you might have to convert it to EPS and then go from there. But it's cool.
Yeah. The Affinity Designer is what I use as well. Next question.
Next up is Hashid in Central Florida. Are Shure 215s worth a buy?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I had brand new, stuck in my head right now. I'm getting used to them, but I don't have anything to compare it to, so I'm probably not a good guy answering this question. But they seem to be okay. I mean, they're a little finicky about how far you press them into your ear, and it changes the frequency response completely.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So the 215s are the lower end offering for sure. They're about $100 for the earbuds. The one thing that, I used Shure the $100 entry for music for many years. So the 215s do a really good job on that. The one thing that they don't do that I would like is detach from the cable. So if you have a cable problem, you can actually switch that out. And some of them are even offering Bluetooth options for cables, so you can either go wired or Bluetooth if you're just listening to music on your phone.
After owning Shures and then experimenting with these Linsoles, I would lean towards the Linsole. I think it's a better buy. It's the KZ line. I say KZ line because there's some that are a little bit more than $99 that are really nice, and some that are less than $99 that are still, I think, just as good as the Shure. To be honest, I actually think that they're more comfortable. I think that they're a better build quality than the Shures. Next question.
George Sita of Webster Groves, Missouri says, is there such a thing as a purely mechanical patch bay for MIDI cables?
Go ahead, Jason.
I just measured it, and if you can find a Keystone adapter, it should work. It might be ever so slightly too large.
Next question.
Harshid in Central Florida is back with, how difficult does Alex find with the barrier to entry, having foundations or facilities for schooling and so forth, something like a tech rehab place, or how you have the Rwanda school? I was mainly thinking of Zambia and Zimbabwe and South Africa.
Those are all places I've worked, including Rwanda and Tanzania and Kenya. It is hard. So it takes time, it took me 10 years to build the school in Rwanda. So it's not something that, like to build up a reputation and build up the contacts that led to being able to do it. Generally, you need to find somebody, in country. We know for South Africa, we know Hasmukh. So, but you need to find somebody in country that really understands the all of the levels, that are well connected. That's the case for most countries, but especially in Africa, you need to find people who are going to be part of that. And then you also have to figure out how you're going to spread it out. How are you going to make Africans successful with what you do, and have them take it over? Like, you have to be building towards they're going to take it over, not that you're going to do it on your own. So those are the things I learned over time, because that's not how I approached it when I first got there. So, but you really have to figure out how people are going to take ownership of it. And that's the way to be the most successful. Next question.
Next question. Harshid in Central Florida is back with, how much was the mute switch that Alex got again? I forgot the name. Any reasonable price, especially with comms and so forth?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I can answer the first part of that question because I just bought them. It's not here yet. The Studio Technologies 205 cost about $800 and change, depending on where you're getting it from. Supply is limited. It is hard to get them, but if you ask them to transfer a 206 into a 205, the factory will make the swap for you so you can get it sooner.
Next question.
Next question comes from Dave Burke in Alexandria, Virginia. And Dave says, on a recent Vergecast, Nilay Patel said that the biggest challenge in pro football broadcasts is the use of mirrorless cameras on the sidelines, giving the broadcast a more YouTube look. Anyone notice this, and how can you tell?
It's a really short depth of field. You'll see it after they score, typically. Sometimes at the beginning of the show, you'll see someone running around with a handheld. It's not a great experience, in my opinion. I feel like they've gone so far to short depth of field that it's all out of focus all the time. It feels ham-fisted. Go ahead, Chris.
I love the phrase YouTube look. It reminds me of the 80s when all of our clients used to say, I want that MTV feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I would love to see them switch all the cameras to Super 35, but I think full frame sensors is too much for a live event. Like, we've learned not to shoot with full frame sensors for a reason, because the depth of field is almost unworkable in any kind of live environment. Next question.
Next one comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, given these people all have Euro visas and logistics were easier pre-COVID-19, how would all prepare Rockin' 1000 in situ if they needed office hours for streaming in the U.S. or down here? I'm assuming he's talking about New Zealand.
I don't know what Rockin' 1000 is. Yeah, I'm afraid that you have to tell me more about it. It's hard for us to kind of look at a YouTube link in live. So yeah, maybe ask that one early before the show, because that gives us time to kind of look at stuff. So especially if you have a link, this is a great tip for the producers. If you have a link that you want us to review or something you want us to think about, that's when you get the question in before the show, or like the day before the show, but definitely try to get in at 6 a.m. our time, so that, because I'm scanning all of those, I'm going through those links, looking at them in the hour before the show. So it's really a good time to do it. But once we get into the show, it's hard for us to see it. We're going to keep moving on this one. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware says a friend wants to know if it's possible to use multi-language captioning on one stream.
You can, but not on YouTube. So not YouTube, Facebook, all of those all need a stream per language. If you want to do multi-language, there are systems to do that. Like, for instance, if you do HLS, will support that. So if you have an HLS player and you're doing an HLS delivery, you can just keep on adding segments to it. I don't know. I think the most I've done is 8 in an HLS player, but you can just keep on adding segments that are going to be those captions that are going out, or languages. It can be multiple captions, multiple languages. HLS will support all of those because it's just another segment and then you declare that in the manifest to the player, and then the player will know what to do with it. Bill, real quick.
I was just going to say, and I'm assuming he's talking about YouTube and things like that, because broadcast has really strict, and they don't allow you to get too outside of the box, particularly in the U.S. in terms of their risk requirements. But if it's the web.
Yeah, but again, if you're streaming it to the web, you can use an HLS delivery mechanism, an HLS player, and Akamai makes a player. There's other players that you can get out there that will be able to see it because it'll be in the manifest for it to look at. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware says a friend wants to know if it's possible to tag as good, no good, an on-camera read without alerting the talent.
Good, Courtney.
Sound reports, that's what those were designed for. And many production recorder software packages like Metacorder or Boom Recorder have a means of clicking circle takes. So you just click that circle take and it marks it as a selected take, and then you can just output a list of all the circle takes at the end, and it'll sort them by time code and if that circle take metadata is selected.
Bill, real quick.
Our friends have a company called Intelligent Assistance, and they make a system that you can literally use an iPad and click on any tag that you create, and it will append it to the metadata in line with a video feed. So it's perfectly possible. Look up Intelligent Assistance.
All right. We are going to now change subjects and talk about the Super Bowl. Talk about the ads, actually. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl ads. This is the one place where people probably play the hardest when it comes to building ads every year. Because the ad placement costs so much. I think this year it was $7 million average for an ad for 30 seconds of time during the Super Bowl, and so it's a big price, but it does get you in front of a lot of people. So I think, and by the way, if the panelists have discussions, things they want to say, go ahead and throw it into the panel discussion there. But it's usually the time where we see some of the best ads, and also main actors that you wouldn't normally see in a commercial. You get to have them for these commercials. These are the one commercial that you can get some of these actors together to actually do something. So yeah, go ahead, Chris.
My favorite one was the Salesforce commercial. I think they played it, I want to say at least twice, 14 million. And it had Matthew McConaughey in it. I have no idea what he was saying, but the image of Matthew McConaughey walking without a helmet in a spacesuit through the wilderness, the desert, whatever, and just that kind of like, hey, check me out, I'm Matthew McConaughey in a spacesuit. It didn't matter what he was saying. Like it didn't. It's just the way he saunters in a spacesuit. Like I'd put him on any planet. Like and I have no idea what he was saying, but it was cool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Grant.
I just looked them up on YouTube, and actually, it's interesting that there was a few people that just have put them all together. So it's like 45 minutes of ads or something. Yeah, and that they're not taken down, right? It's just some private user. Of course, they'd have all of these. It would have all these content matches, but they'd be very happy for their ads to be all over YouTube, right? And so, something that stood out to me was the category. I'm sure this is the same every year, but like travel, cars, tech, and some food. But it was just it just came to lots of cars, lots of electric cars. I saw only one that wasn't an electric car. There was the different tech companies like Squarespace and different ones. But the one that really caught my attention was the Coinbase one, which was the QR code that was bouncing around on the screen. I just thought that was awesome. As in, how many people would have actually just it was there for 30 seconds, and it was doing the DVD, the DVD logo bouncing on the screen. I was like, yeah, there we go. And this is, such low budget, right?
Well, the thing is, I'm sure it wasn't. That's the most expensive screensaver ever. Is this thing there? And what's interesting about it is that. I guess some folks, I think we were talking about it here, and someone else told me that they were at a bar and there was all these phones that were doing this thing where they're all moving, trying to get the QR code. Was that you, John? Were you talking about that? Was someone
yeah, everybody at the bar was trying to capture it.
Capture the QR code. And
too bad they didn't plan on it and they crashed their website.
Well, it crashed their website, but it did take their app from it took their app from number 186 or something to 2
187, yeah,
in the App Store, 187 to number 2. Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Did it actually did it end up perfectly in the corner at the end?
No, it did a crash. Awesome. It does this. It's actually like, here, watch. It looked like it was a mistake in the broadcast. It goes Coinbase. Right. It's like it gave you the blue screen. So it gave you a blue screen of death. With this kind of like if you watch it here. And it just kind of puts it in there, drops Coinbase.com. So it's
for those that haven't seen it, there's a video of guys of a full bar with people watching the DVD logo, and it goes into the corner, and they all cheer. It's like this amazing thing they've been waiting.
I will admit, I probably would have split it into 2 30-second ads, because then you'd see it again and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I gotta get it. I gotta get a hold of the thing. Yeah. Make everybody crazy. But it was I think it was the perfect function over form, which is that it wasn't a beautiful ad. It wasn't going to get you it might get somebody an award. I said that on Twitter. I was like, it's not going to get an award. I was like, it might. It might get an award. But the amount of impact that it had, and to what Chris said, they crashed the servers. This is the thing, by the way, when we do events and people say, and we're going to go big, anytime someone says we're going to be in front of millions of people, there's a whole bunch of discussions that we have about stress testing, and making sure that we're ready for the worst possible. And the problem is that we have to explain to clients is that you can do stress. There's all kinds of great ways to do it in AWS. You can just point a whole bunch of servers and just do basically a denial of service attack on your to see how much it can handle. The problem is that is not the behavior that a human has. And this is what really screws these things up. So they probably did a stress test for 100 million hits, but they were doing it the way a computer does it, not the way a human does it. When a human can't get in for a live activation, they start becoming irrational. and they start tapping on it a ton of times, and they start doing a bunch of other things, and they start whacking on it, and that is the thing that destabilizes the, so because what happens is suddenly one person has the impact of 100 because they're radical, they're hitting something really, really hard. And so that's the thing that we always have to warn people about, is that you just don't, you don't know what's going to happen there. But it's a good problem to have. Go ahead, Courtney.
The things I look for in a good Super Bowl commercial is humor and production value. And the Larry David ones is based on his Curb Your Enthusiasm character. Was, I know Alex probably hates it.
Oh, no, I love. See, here's the funny thing is I don't like Curb Your Enthusiasm in general. Like, it just makes me uncomfortable. But the this is the ad. We won't play the audio for it, but this is the ad here, and it's just, if you haven't seen it, for some reason you didn't see this, you have to go watch it. But yeah, it's just Larry David just going, I don't think this is a good idea. Hold on,
So does a bagel, okay? A bagel you can eat. One of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Brother David, behold, it's a fork. I got 10 forks right here, baby. Am I right? My lord? What is it? A toilet, my lord. A toilet? You expect this court to do its business inside? We're not animals. We go outside like humans.
This is my favorite one.
It's new. Oh, it's awful. You don't like it? I'm all jittery and feel like I got a big job coming up. Hancock, you sign first.
Anyway.
Yo, king! Gentlemen, have you taken leave of your senses? The people shall have the right to vote. Even the stupid ones? Yes. Stupid people vote? Yes. Edison, can I be honest with you? It stinks. Does your wife know what's going on here? She knows I go to work. You're wasting your time.
Anyway.
That's sad.
She knows what?
She knows
How
I'm
long
going to
is
work.
this?
This is the extended one. So
okay, so they didn't air this at the,
I think they did. I think we saw it in the Super Bowl. They did
it's
air,
like
air
3
the whole
minutes
thing.
long.
Yeah, I think that they spent.
I think they split it up though, right?
Yeah,
the woman from Hidden Figures is the nurse.
Yeah,
that's so great.
And what is it an ad for?
It's an ad for it's some kind of Bitcoin thing. That's the worst part. Is that's the thing that gets you? Is that like I don't remember what it's for, but I just remember it's Larry David.
It just says, "Don't be like Larry David."
Yeah, don't be like Larry David. Invest in Bitcoin. I mean, that's kind of the message. Is but again, so this is the other example: is how many of these ads that we all know the Coinbase one. Like, we all saw it. A bunch of people downloaded the app. We know that Larry David did a really funny ad, but I can't remember the name of the company that did it. Now, the ad agency is going to win an award for it, and they're going to have another little trophy, and they're going to have, and they're going to get more. They're definitely going to get more clients based on the fact that this ad was really, really good. It's just that it wasn't effective.
Millions of dollars it cost to produce that with all the different costumes and locations.
Oh, yeah. No, it's probably a probably $10 million production for an ad, and that's okay, But I will say that that's the problem with the ads that we look at, is that we get really excited and then we can't remember what the ad was. Like, I thought that the one with Zendaya was good because it really, it was telling a story. If you look at, I won't play too much of that. Let's cut this. But this one was a story about someone selling seashells on the seashore, and and it was funny, and it was well produced, and it told a story about why you use Squarespace. Like, it wasn't like a completely random thing. So anyway, I thought that was another good one.
And the one last one I want to mention is the Jason Bateman one for Ionic car was also very clever and had, like the Larry David one, had a bunch of little vignettes throughout time, which was
It did. I don't have, for some reason, I had trouble downloading that one right before the show, but I can't show it. But yeah, the Jason Bateman one I thought was really good, especially when they jump back to the beginning. Like, it's been a long, and it goes back to cavemen, very long time. Yeah, so that was another good one. Go ahead, Jason. Jason.
I think I actually have the entire production for Coinbase right here. It's a Hi 8, and it's pouting a digital studio titler. Very cutting edge stuff. Yeah. The one that really caught me off guard that I thought was so colossally weird, most notably because they made no mention of what it was for, but alluded to it, was the smart home COVID test. That was so weird.
I don't think I even saw it. I didn't even.
Yeah, it was a one-off. It was a one-off, and it was hard to. It was only once. So yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there's when you have the budget and that you can actually do yet another Dr. Evil, Austin Powers. The fact that he kept on wanting to hit the button was great. Anyway, and this was kind of fun. Like this was a good, and one of the other things is that what's interesting is there's so many extended versions on the web that didn't air. To Chris's point, is that they actually had they put ones on YouTube knowing that you're going to go find the extended cut, and some of them I think even said like check out YouTube for the extended cut at the end of the like if you want to watch more of this ad. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, having worked for a long time in advertising, it's interesting because Super Bowl is usually a branding fiesta, and it was again this time. It's not, you're not actually selling anything. You're not trying to drive people to do things other than things like maybe grab the QR code, but it's a long tail play because you're not going to have somebody watch it on the Super Bowl and go buy your product right now.
Unless it's Coinbase.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how many, capturing IDs, yes, that I think was probably hugely and massively effective.
Very useful, though. It's very useful to have that many people download your app.
I understand that, but the point that I'm making is that these things have long tails. So the question is, how many of these advertisers, for me as somebody who worked in advertising, are going to convert into long-time change in perception behavior? Because that's what these are trying to do. These ads like, I want to make McDonald's feel good to you with Mean Joe Green, or something equivalent to an emotion attached to a product. And so I've mentioned a couple of times the Polestar ad only because it caused me to notice the next night when I was watching regular TV and its ad came out, and I didn't at first understand it was the same company, but it was a first step into a campaign that may make them an acceptable also look at for Rivian and the other ones who have done so much, spent so much money and achieved so much market share from a zero startup in a very competitive industry. It's going to be interesting to see how many do that. Most of the other products we already knew about, right? Salesforce we already knew about. These great ads were continuation campaigns. There were a few, and I would classify Coinbase's brilliant ad in this, where there was a lot of the audience probably never heard of Coinbase, and now they know it. Same thing with this car, same thing with a few of the other ads. They weren't trying to build on a brand. They were trying to create a market perception of a brand for the first time with a big splash.
Yeah, I think the hard part is when you start a campaign like that, the only time I see ads is for the Super Bowl.
Same.
like that's the challenge that I think a lot of advertisers have is I go to the Super Bowl expecting to watch the ads. I watch them on YouTube sometimes if they're released before the show. And so, but the only time I see ads is during the Super Bowl. And so it's a very odd thing. I mean, I think this is just a challenge for advertisers is that the market for their advertising is evaporating, very, very fast, especially in the markets that they typically target. Nobody's watching,
And I think the point for them though, is they're thinking that when you see that billboard coming up in 6 months with a price and item on that vehicle, you'll have some familiarity. It's not just a random, what's that? You'll connect that to the Super Bowl experience, even if it was a one-off.
Of course, I live in Marin. We're not allowed to have billboards.
Oh, there you go. That's right.
Doesn't show up
You're one of the
0.5%
of the country who doesn't allow billboards.
So great. Go ahead, Doug Grant.
Yeah, the thing that I found interesting is of the celebrities. I'm thinking like the companies that would have invested crazy amounts of money before they even start the production. Buying the airtime, and then just securing those celebrities. So I think T-Mobile must be right up there because, Dolly Parton, sure, Miley Cyrus, And then you had so Miley Cyrus wouldn't have been cheap. And then the Scrubs guys. I mean, Zach Braff, and is that his name? Braff, yeah. And so they would have sunk a lot of cash into that. But then Sam's Club with Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart would not have done that for little money. You know, like that would have been some serious cash for him to do it before. And actually the production on that was actually pretty ordinary. They probably run out of cash just giving it all to Kevin.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I mean, I've worked on a couple Super Bowl ads, and they bought them before they knew what they were going to do with it. Like, because there's such a demand for the slot that you're throwing the ball to a receiver that is still at the. It's like hike throw, you know, and
Still
and
in
now
training camp.
Oh yeah, I mean yeah, exactly. I mean it's like they're coming. They have the slot. They buy the slots, and then they. It's something that a lot of times for especially small companies like a Coinbase or something like that. Typically, they'll be talking about it years before they do it, and then and they'll talk about what they could do and everything else. But for the big companies, they buy that slot, and a lot of times they don't. Well, at least in the ones that there's a time when you have to submit it. I don't remember what it was, like a month before or something, or a couple weeks before, that you have to submit it for approval. And but I can't remember what that date that cutoff was. But a lot of times they still make them right near the end because they don't want to make something that is they plan it all out. But we were working on it in the fall, in the shoot I think was in October or something like that. But that's because you don't want to build something in April that now has something in it that you can't use, because of some news thing or whatever. And so we've had some where there's one ad that I worked on that didn't go anywhere because it did something that was really cool, and then something happened on Twitter and they couldn't put it up. They were like we can't, you can't do that anymore. So.
I saw a TikTok of a consultant that had to come in for a company that had bought time and only looked at their contract later to see that it was only in overtime. They bought an ad block
they thought they were getting a
in
good deal.
Overtime.
This thing is like half price. So it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had to scramble and completely change it and bought some other stuff. And, and they did some online stuff to make it work, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill?
Yeah, there's another thing, the celebrity Q ratings, and this is something, advertising tracks everything, and they track the psychographics and the demographics of which stars appeal to which groups, which is why you saw that Jones commercial with Tommy Lee and also Leslie Jones. I mean, could there be two more diverse groups of fans, but you pile them together, and then Nick Jonas at the end, and those kind of things are designed to attract cross-audience groupings for a product that can be bought by a lot of people across demographics. The amount of research that goes into these ad things, that's why Kevin Hart, I think, he's just one of those people sparkles on camera, and they know that he has a huge following, and people just smile the moment they see him. And I don't have to open his mouth. There's 4 or 5 things of people, Robin Williams, that you get that same reaction at. People just light up the moment their face comes on, and those are the people who make the incredibly big bucks and deserve it in terms of capturing those eyeballs.
Let's jump to the first question.
Ranjan Shandil, in Los Angeles says, what Netflix-style metrics are used to track today's Super Bowl ad watch times?
I don't know about what. Well, they generally there's Nielsen, of course. The cable companies have much more data now. Now that you're connected to their, to their systems. Obviously, YouTube has a ton of data. So if you're watching on YouTube live, TV.YouTube, whatever, they're gonna have a lot of data about what you're doing. Water flow. So they know how many people are watching the ad. No, not the ads, but know how many people are watching the Super Bowl by how often they're flushing their toilets. It's a really funny thing. It actually turns out to be a relatively accurate, thing for something that big. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and if you're not in the industry, advertising is built on an inverted pyramid model, which is this thing, the bottom end is the production cost. And when you hear that this ad cost $10 million to produce, what they're saying is that above it in the inverted pyramid, they were spending probably hundreds of millions of dollars on the campaign to get impressions with whatever the creative was on the bottom. Right. So everything is reduced to metrics and everything is tracked. Literally, I've seen focus groups where all that changes is the angle of the product and which one attracts the viewers more quickly, moving from cut A to cut B. I mean, it's relentlessly turned into numbers.
Courtney?
I hope you can hear me. I just got out of a hard crash there. One thing I noticed the other day is, I don't know if it ran during the Super Bowl, but there was a car commercial that has a pounding rock and roll soundtrack, and in the middle of it, it's talking about the features in the AV system, and it goes, "Hey Google," only it says it normally, but it doesn't then give it a command. It just continues with this rock and roll thing, and I noticed every time that ad plays, my Google Home activates and starts listening. But it does, since it doesn't hear a command after 10 seconds or so, it shuts off. And I'm wondering if the ad company put that phrase in there so that they can buy the metrics from Google to see how many people had their TV set on and that their ad play was audible in. Because that'd be a great way to get metrics, sneaky way to get metrics out.
We've had a couple ads with Siri that way. It makes me a little crazy. When or something that sometimes it's close to Siri, it's not exactly Siri. That becomes problematic. But yeah, there's still a lot of the traditional Nielsen stuff that they now use. I think an automated box. They don't make you. I don't think you still have to fill out the little forms. But
diaries are pretty gone.
Yeah, no diaries are necessary anymore. But the and then they extrapolate from there, and they're pretty accurate. I mean, the bottom line is people know that it'll be all the demand that you can handle. Generally, when you want it, if you have an ad that has a call to action, that's Coinbase took advantage of that. Next question.
Ranjan Sandil is back from Los Angeles with another one. He says, what unique storytelling techniques do Super Bowl ads use that regular ads don't?
Longer time. Like a lot of them, if they're going to spend the money, some of these ads, the full size one that we saw, they're 2 minutes long or 2.5 minutes long or 3 minutes long, and they put them on YouTube, and then they have a shortened version sometimes. But I'm pretty sure that, like that Larry David one, I'm pretty sure they played it all the way through. I remember seeing it go by as we were talking about it, and I was thinking, that's a really long ad. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there was a cut down. If they can afford it, if it's a deep pocketed, a lot of times they will do serial ads where the story continues from ad to ad to ad. So later in the Super Bowl, you get a continuation of the story that was started in the previous ad. So there's a serialization that you don't find in other ads. I think an ad I worked on many years ago was the first Eveready Energizer Bunny commercial, where the bunny leaves, they have the establishing shot about the Energizing Bunny leaving the stage, and then 2 ads later, a fake 30-second ad shows up and the Energizer Bunny goes through, and so on. So that was a way of continuing the joke through multiple ads.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from John Preto in Las Vegas, USA, here on the panel. Does anyone know how they allot for local ads and how much they charged for those?
I don't. Yeah, go ahead. Bill?
Okay, so in the rating system, and this is the old one that I played in most of the time back in the Nielsen days, there is, the U.S. is broken down into what are called ADIs, or areas of dominant interest, and they form markets. So when a local advertiser buys, they can buy region, they can buy ADI, and sometimes if there are multiple stations feeding multiple parts of an ADI, they can get down to that level. So those local, what they're called local adjacencies, those can be fed with an individual ad for a market area, and how big it is and there's this thing called reach and frequency in advertising that is like the holy grail. How many people you're reaching and how many times can you get your name or product in front of those people? And there's all sorts of metrics about, people won't act if they see something once, but twice and 3 times they'll start to react. So those ADIs and how much reach you're getting and how big a package you're buying, how much frequency you're trying to get, not just today, but through the course of your ad campaign, that determines your rates. Everything floats based on all those things.
Yeah, it's weird, though, that a lot of times there's a fill. Like there's just, I mentioned it one time that I think it was during the Super Bowl, our golf course, and my brother paid like $5 for that ad. Then it just lit up the whole system. So there's an automated system, and I think if it errantly grabs it. I don't know how many ads they get. I don't think it's very many, but I think that there's probably a couple ads per quarter that are local, And if they, for some reason, didn't sell them for one cable network, they'll just throw in, they have this kind of, that fill. So what happens is that I think it was just totally random that we saw the ad pop up, is that if for some reason they didn't fill it or someone canceled or whatever, it just goes and grabs it from the pot of stuff. Because my brother just pays for, when he does ads, he just puts it, he pays the lowest amount, like for a time it was like $5 or $10 an ad. What it means is that 30 seconds didn't go not making any money. Like it was just, and they need to fill the time because, in a TV network, they're giving you a black space. So you have to fill that time with an ad or something. A lot of times those are PSAs that they're, that they put on. Those are network ads. So if you see an ad about Comcast on Comcast, that was typically a non-sold 30-second window that they just threw that into. And so those are the ways that they kind of fill time. And so those are all automated. And, you can get a lottery where it just pops up. But generally, they're trying to sell them at a premium to exactly what Bill was talking about. Real quick, Bill.
Yeah, and Alex just talked about the concept of warming the edge. That happens in advertising too. The farther you get from the big network feed, so you're getting a local adjacency here, they have a pool of, some of them are PSA, public service announcements, and some of them are exactly what Alex is talking about. They're going to throw out at your regular rate for ongoing clients who are in there a soft ad and use it for that adjacency if the PSA doesn't make as much sense. So it's a complicated process. Advertising is very complicated.
Next question.
Greg Sweich looks like in Irwin, Pennsylvania. Oh, Swick, I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name. Here's the standard Apple Super Bowl ad, and he has a link there, and I imagine it's a 1984 ad.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, I think Apple has only advertised in the Super Bowl 3 times. The 84 ad, which was the introduction of the Macintosh with the hammer throw, and then there was the Lemmings ad, which was the next year, 85, and then there was an ad I worked on, which was 1999, the Y2K with the HAL 9000. Interesting anecdote on that ad, all the graphics in that ad were created on PCs. No apples were used in the production of that entire commercial.
Which is usually not the direction it went. Like we used to joke that all the Intel Inside ads were rendered out of Electric Image, which was on a Mac, only on a Mac. So all the ones where it's flying through the thing and then spinning up and landing, that was all those Intel Insides had a Motorola inside or whatever, or a Mount PC inside. So it was a funny thing. Yeah, I heard, I don't know this as a fact, but I heard that Ridley Scott had no idea who Apple was. Like when he did it, he was like, "Who are these guys? And what am I supposed to do?" And so that's why he kind of created something that had very little to do with the computer. I mean, the concept was more of the little one going against the big one, and I think, and then he just made something up because he didn't know. But it was still probably one of the best ads out ever. Yeah. Next question.
Marty Adius, our friend who's here on the panel often from Maryland, says, if people aren't watching commercials on a regular basis and companies stop buying time, how can media companies fund production and broadcasting?
Subscription. Like that's what we're moving towards. That's why there's a Paramount channel and a Peacock channel and a Fox channel and everything else. They have to find some other way to generate revenue, and they are definitely on a sinking ship. And this is why we don't see a lot of new investment in those areas. You'll see sparks of investment, so every 4 years, everybody gets a lot of money to spend on elections because that's the one time that all their ad spaces are sold at 2x and 3x the normal cost. So they suddenly are flush with money. So a lot of times every 4 years in the United States, you see, upgrades to the networks and so on and so forth. But outside of that, it is and by the way, I'm not gonna say it anyway. So there's a lot there. So anyway, but they're in trouble. They're in a lot of trouble because there's less and less people. More and more. The problem really is that the people that you want the most, the consumers that have the most fluid money, are buying their way out of ads. That's the real challenge that you have. Go ahead, Bill.
I just also want to point out something that I think everybody should keep in the back of their mind. The reason you're getting inundated constantly with everything trying to move to subscription is the almost unbelievable power of switching from an opt-in system to an opt-out system. And what I mean by that is on television advertising or anything else, you have to actually turn on your television and sit to watch it. You opt in or the ad never reaches you. When you move over to an opt-out system, that means that you are paying your subscription whether or not you ever turn on the service or ever look at the ad or ever do anything. In fact, you can die and next month you will get charged for that subscription service. We hope that that doesn't happen to everybody, but statistically it's going to happen to a lot of people. So people who have gone in the hospital come home and find out that they've had 4 months of charging for their cable service, even though they've been in a hospital. It is a different economic model that tremendously shifts the power of money making into the hands of producers. I think it's just something to think about.
I think it is, but I think that the problem is that a lot of people, the problem with a lot of folks that do numbers, and this is, I actually think like all this data that everyone's tracking of every person and how they watch it and everything else, it all makes sense to actuaries, that do it. But what it does is it has you measure certain things and then execute against those measurements. And generally it's not the whole system. It's not how people feel. It's not what they think. It's not, and what happens is that you stress systems and people get upset. Like that's what people are angry with social media, because it's too much of that. The ads, there's too much targeting, too much of those other things. And so I think that that's going to be a challenge. And I think in that sense, when you get to subscriptions, it's too much. Like I've already reached my limit. I got this update from Netflix that they're going to increase my rates or whatever. And I'm, in middle of March or whatever. And I was like, do I really need Netflix? Like, I just don't know if I care. Like, I don't know if I care if Netflix is on. My wife's in some series. I think she's watching Ozarks or something like that. I was like, you got to finish it by March 13th. Like no pressure, but we're going to pull the plug. And so, I'm pretty close to dropping Netflix because I just haven't found that in the last couple of years that I spend much time there, and I think that that's the real challenge, is that now I'm starting to think hard about every subscription. And I think that's going to be problematic because like Peacock, I've never seen. Paramount, I've never seen. They were too late. Like I'm already subscribed to Disney Plus and HBO Max and Apple Plus and Netflix. I think that's about YouTube TV, which is the big one, right? And I do that professionally because I can grab things for research. Like tomorrow.
I'm starting a new streaming service. It's called Fenwick Plus. You might want to check it out.
It's just going to be at
the end of every all the time.
It's going to be great. Yeah. I'm just going to say it's going to be great. I just missed out on getting a Superbowl ad.
Oh yeah.
Next year.
That's the plan. Yeah, go with Grunt.
Yeah, I think.
But before we get started, as we talk through it, this is going to be a really short show if people don't ask more questions or make more comments, because we're on the last question is next, which I'm okay with. I'm just letting you know we're talking as much as we can. Anyway, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think that I'm probably old enough to remember just kind of watching TV. Watching a 23-minute episode of something and 7 minutes of ads, and then watching movies with ads in them, and watching sport with ads in them, and now that is offensive to me. Like the idea of I want to watch a TV series and I want to watch 3 episodes back to back, and I'll do it with no ads, and I'll watch movies in a great experience, and I might still pause it, but it's on my plan and whatever. And then sport now, increasingly, I'm getting sport. We can get we've got a service here called KO, which is from Fox, so Fox Sports, but it's a full streaming service that works great, and there's no ads during play. Right, so you're watching the game, and you get kind of this football between goals. You'll get some other interesting stuff that happens that would normally on free to air would go to ads, and so people are just getting used to that now. And the idea of seeing ads is just like, why am I seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is totally offensive. And which is why companies are going after influencers and TikTok and paying influencers to do their ads for them, but the production is going down, which is why I think even more so with the Superbowl ads, they had to go super high end production. I mean, they were like mini movies. Like some of the visual effects on it were amazing. They were outstanding. There was crazy money spent.
And it's the one time you get to do that because people are actually there to watch the ads. Like, and I think it also does tell us that people aren't upset about watching ads. They're just upset about watching boring content in between the good content. If you make great ads, if every ad looked like a Super Bowl ad during the year, people would probably not complain so much about watching it. Although the problem is once you've seen it 20 times, you're like, okay, I've seen that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as far as funding of production and for dramatic entertainment found on television, subscriptions, I guess, is about the only way you can go to fund that if you're not going to carry advertising. And then there might be aggregators like Netflix is, that in the future will aggregate several of the streaming channels, which are singular subscriptions, into a common one. So they form the function of basically a cable company only with streaming, so that they'll aggregate several of the non-commercial streamers together into one spot. I think that's the way it's going to go. And as far as getting a new product before the public, which is if you eliminate advertising, how are you going to, if you got a new widget, you're going to try and sell somebody, how are you going to advertise it? Well, the only way is product placement within the narrative or whatever people are watching sports. You find that in the
only place.
the big gulp cans on the desk in America's Got Talent and so on. That's the only way you can get noticed, other than billboards or word of mouth.
Well, it's not the only place. I mean, I think that there is a future for brands to think about building communities around their brands. That those communities are people that are actively interested in doing it. The problem is, if you build those communities, you want to build them right now when you can still run ads. And so they need to figure out a way to do that. Where people who are interested in what they're in that process.
That's what the influencers are. But once you eliminate the ads,
it's not the influencers. I'm talking about a real community around that brand.
Word of mouth, in other words. Yeah.
No, not word of mouth. A community like what we're doing here, except around a specific, like what someone like Blackmagic should be doing. We're digressing because we have a lot of time and not a lot of questions. But like a Blackmagic Apple does it a little bit. Like Apple people are all following Apple all the time. Like, they don't have to run that many ads to do it. They do, but they don't have to at this point. But a Blackmagic, in my opinion, should be building a community like what we have that is connected to all their products and all their stuff. And same with sound devices, same with anybody else. Then when they say, hey, we've got something coming out, it ripples out into the system, and there are people who are ready to, drop money down. Like, I think that Apple, just to flex, should in the fall say, we're releasing a new phone. We're not going to tell you anything about it. The big one is $1,200. The middle one's $800. The little one is $600. We're not going to tell you anything about them. And a week before they do the keynote, you can buy it, just to show how that they can sell 30 million of them without even telling you what it is. That's
I'd buy
building.
One. Why not?
I would. Yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, the point is that it's building a connection with the audience and building a real connection, to the audience, because, and creating a fanatical base that's willing to buy what you're selling and definitely at least wants to know about it. But that comes from, if you took all the money that they're spending on all these things and did that, you'd end up with a lot of, even like you look at Salesforce. Salesforce doesn't, their live streaming isn't very good, but they don't do a ton of it, but they do a lot of support. And there's a lot of people that are pretty fanatical when they show up at Dreamforce, about Salesforce, because there's tons and tons and tons of education and tons of process. And that's a closed system for Salesforce. They do advertise, but a lot of it is built around a community around their product.
Well, there's a term for that called buzz, and that's what viral marketing is.
It's not buzz.
A lot of ad agencies are now putting a lot of money into viral.
Yeah, but it's not buzz. It is a community connection. It's different than buzz. It's not. This is a people directly connected to the brand, constantly using it, but constantly interacting with the brand. That's not buzz. Buzz is like people talking about it at the water cooler. This is a true connection. I was talking
about your example of Apple mentioning we're going to release a phone. It's going to be this. It's going to be this. So generating excitement about an upcoming product. That's what I was talking
about. But if they just literally just sent out a ping to Apple users, they would sell 30 million of them without any other. But that's a connection that Apple's built out of managing their brand very tightly. Putting their user first, trust. Like trust is a big, like we trust that Apple cares about quality and stability, and it doesn't always happen, but we know that that's their direction, and they do it more often than everybody else. So that's so the thing is that I think that brands have to figure out how to build a direct relationship with their audience, or it's going to get harder and harder. Like this is not going to get better. And the problem is that when it's still working, no one wants to fix it. I've talked about this in the past. I 20 years ago, I did a presentation in front of, I don't know, a couple hundred magazine publishers, like pretty much every major magazine. If you walk into Walmart or something like that, or what used to be there. And I said, you need to move to social. You need to move, not social, but you need to move to direct relationships online right now. Use your magazine. You've got millions of subscribers. Push them into a community right now, before it's too late. And they literally, I mean, some of them were actually laughing, but a lot of them were just nodding their head like this kid is crazy. And now they're dead, because they didn't utilize their dominant position to set themselves up. And of course, that's the definition of a monopoly, right? Use your dominant position to set you up into another market. But that's what they should have done. They didn't have a monopoly. They should have taken the 7 million subscribers they had and converted it to 4 million people that were connected to them directly. And that's what brands have to do right now. And if they don't do it, well, they won't be around. Go ahead, Chris.
I think one of the things that we as a community need to think about, not worry about, that we are the definition of the lunatic fringe of the bell curve. I mean, how many people do you know that get up, sit around for 3 hours every day and talk about, tech stuff? We're weird. Okay. So, I'll give you an interesting example when it comes to advertising. My wife loves all the Sister Act movies. She loves those movies. It's great. They start playing on the TV, and her and the girls, they're all singing every word to every song. They love those movies. I can't stand watching them with ads. So one day I showed her on the Apple TV. I go, look here, buy these. Just when you want to watch the movie, just please watch it without the ad. I cannot tell you how many times I've walked through my living room and they're sitting there watching Sister Act on TV with ads. They can play it without the ads. But the television experience with ads, it's going to be around for a long time. It's going to be around for a long time. It won't be in your living room and my office. It is, unfortunately, my living room because they control the TV. But there are people that television is a complacent thing.
Yeah, but the question is under 40. Like it's, the thing is that I don't think that, I think but that's evaporating, and that's the problem is that it's
changing. I don't think it's changing as fast as you think.
Oh no, I think it's still 10 years away, but I think that at 10 years, people are going to be having a really hard time, making this work. I mean, I do think that there's another decade of it, but I'm not saying that everyone has to do something next year.
It drives me nuts when she's watching it with the ads though.
Chris, that's not about the ads. That's about programmed.
It's about the behavior. It's about, the right thing at the right time.
Just sitting down, turning it on and not having to think. And it's like, oh, this is great. I didn't have to go find it. It's passive. It's just sitting there and just
that's what
consuming
TV
it.
still is for most people. The bell curve.
And Netflix have talked about doing live channels. So that type of thing will happen, and there'll be scheduled programming that you can just sit down and just turn it on and something will pop up.
But even like what surprised me is that my parents haven't seen live TV, except for football games for a decade. like they, and they're in their 70s, they have completely, the main thing is once you turn the corner and you build in the behavior, you may not do that. I mean, your wife has obviously decided not to do that, but a lot of times it at that point, it's really hard to go back. There's some point where you watch it, you go long enough without ads that when you come back to them, you're like, what is going on? Go ahead, Bill.
So for me, there's two topics here, and this has been really interesting. The reason I think that television has worked since the 50s is because it did a brilliant job of removing friction from the process of attacking two things. One of them is loneliness. The other thing is camaraderie. in the beginning, television was that little central hearth that people gathered together and watched I Love Lucy and were able to talk about it at the water cooler. Also, I've known lots of people who don't have something during the day, and I hate being putting in these things, but the homemaker who was stuck at home while the other part of the party was off working or something like that had little companionship. And so they turned on to see Friends, and they got into their soaps and whatever. And I think this cuts across human beings, whatever thing is, you don't want to be lonely and you want to be part of a community. So television removed friction from that process. Then the other thing, to Alex's point, which I find fascinating, is that one thing I know for sure, if your vision were to be able to come to fruition, and Apple did that thing, 48 hours after they announced that initiative, there would be a lot of voices online telling you how bad it was going to be, how too expensive it was going to be, or how not progressive enough it was going to be, or what if they missed this, and there would be a
and Apple users wouldn't care.
They wouldn't. But the point is that that's where we are in the competitive landscape. It's not enough to do something and intrigue people with it. There is this other side of what is PR now, of people telling you why you shouldn't do things and how bad it's going to be in advance. And this is my point, in advance of knowing anything about the product. And we've seen that with software. We've seen that with hardware. We've seen that with news cycles. People telling you how bad something's going to be before it's ever happened.
And I think that the thing that I'm noticing, that I've just noticed about myself, and that maybe, and I know we're on the fringe, but I would call us the canary in the coal mine as opposed to an exception. We're just further out to in looking back. And I will say that since we launched After Hours, I have heard 1 hour. I used to listen to an hour of NPR at least a day, maybe 1, 2, 3 hours of NPR a day. And I've heard 1 hour since we started After Hours.
That's positive. I like that.
Well, all I'm saying is that I just stopped. Like, it was the conversation that we have in After Hours most days is better than anything, more applicable to me than anything that I was getting before. And you got to get. I've been listening to NPR for 2 or 3 hours a day since I was 12. Like it was like not like there's a huge behavior change, for me, to just stop listening. And I didn't notice that I'd stopped listening. I just noticed that every time I was like, oh, I want to listen to something while I'm walking or driving or whatever, I don't think about the radio anymore. I think about, I'm just going to jump into After Hours. And the reason I bring that up is because imagine an After Hours, thousands of them for all the different verticals that we're interested in. At that point, that's why advertisers need to think about it, is because if that actually occurred, people would have no time to watch the other things, and it's not that they won't watch anything, but they won't watch anything casual. And I will argue that casual viewing is like 80% of TV and radio. It's just that I want to fill my time with something. And if you take that away, then it's just the Super Bowl and big movies. Go ahead, Jason.
One way or another, community is truly the key. One of my favorite comics of all time has to do with an entire black and white train, a whole subway car train, men in 3-piece suits, all holding newspapers, not looking at all at each other. And what it said was something like, kids these days just don't know how to communicate. You need to understand, to a 3-year-old, a magazine is a broken iPad. And, this kind of intergenerational shift. I am nearly 40. I have never had cable television. Cable companies know this. It's not, this is news to nobody, which is why they're kind of changing the way that that they're monetizing these things.
And I will say that the drop in cable subscriptions has been much faster than everyone was predicting. It is 2 or 3 times faster, and that's what has them all, worried. Next question.
Next question comes up from Michael J. in New York City, and Michael says, "Hi everyone. Any insight on the tech used for sound during the halftime show? It looked like all performers use some kind of wireless equipment."
The only performers that we heard, I think we talked about this the other day, is the singers. I don't know what wireless they were using. My guess would lean towards Axient, because that's usually what we use in a complex environment, but I don't know that for sure. Everything else is tracked. So all the other performers for this performance would have been tracked. There's a handful of performers like the Rolling Stones and a handful of others that have wanted to perform either one or all their instruments live, but it is very, very rare. And I think that even the voices, the backup tracks in some voices, I think there was some controversy over Eminem stopping before his voice did. And there's safety tracks for everybody all the time. And so, or have been for the last 20 years, I think. So there is a vocal track for everybody, but it's better to keep it live if you can. But the instruments are just too complicated to set up. We're now running out of time, so we're gonna move on to the next one. Next question.
Greg Grichheimer in Topping, Virginia says, or it's Grichmeyer, excuse me. Super Bowl is a very large number of eyes all at once. Where might that be found in the future streaming world?
It won't. We're about to witness the media version of the Tower of Babel, and people are going to break up. There's not going to be any central location for much longer. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, just simply because all streaming is done at your convenience, and so it doesn't all happen at the same time. So only things like a sporting event where people want to know about what the outcome is of the game is the only place you're going to have real time presentation of something creative like the commercials. Anything else is all going to be spread out over a period of time. So there'll have to be a collective monitoring of that.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
I think there's going to be a virtualization of the Super Bowl. It's going to be drone racing, or it's going to be Overwatch or something like that. And I think the Connected Planet will get together for finals of something like that.
I don't think it'll be Overwatch, but it will be
maybe not Overwatch, but some equivalent game player.
But I think you're right there. I think that there's going to be esports that get big. The reason esports are big, like they go, okay, they're big, but they're not like football big. They're like geek big, and what they're missing is an arena. Like for 3,000 years, we get into a big thing and we watch a bunch of people compete where we can all see everything. And the problem with all these esports games is that they're like these little mazes of things that people can't keep track of. But someone's going to do an arena. And when they do an esports arena, like a Coliseum, they will be a big deal.
In Unreal, how long can it take them? Unreal Engine, you could do a Coliseum if you had enough compute power, and it would be.
That'd be great.
It'll all happen.
They just haven't done it yet. Go ahead.
There are arenas.
They're just not. They're not building them.
They're not the size of the Super Bowl, but there are arenas.
They're just not. They just haven't turned them into a thing yet. That's all.
Yeah, the only thing you're going to get all those eyes at once is if something can be gambled upon, the outcome of the game, and then you're going to get real time stuff.
There you go. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington's up next. He says, I always love the style of the Where's the Beef ads, the look, but mostly the trombone beats in the background. Any ideas if it's possible to recreate music like that in an app? I believe Nike also did ads like this same ad agency.
I'm sure that you could do it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I think Settlemyer was the agency that did the original Where's the Beef ads, and they were notorious for their sarcastic or sardonic ads.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
If you're good enough, you can do that in GarageBand or Logic or any one of a number of PC programs. The tools are all there now. It's that magic combination of artists working together to make everything work seamlessly. I mean, if they hadn't cast Clara in the Where the Beef's ads, it would not have had the same impact, I don't think. It was just kind of magic.
Yeah, but go ahead. Next question.
Robert Collins in Kansas City, Missouri. What do you think makes a good ad versus a bad ad?
I would say moving the audience. Like it could be laughing, it could be upset, it could be whatever, but actually creating a reaction. Bill?
The first stage in all ad creation has typically been a thing called the treatment. And the treatment outlines, what are you trying to accomplish? What exactly are you trying to accomplish? And it could be to increase sales by 30%, or it could be to establish the brand in 40% of the market based on post interviews in some place. There's just all sorts of ways to do it. But that treatment, which amazingly is missing in almost all the script creation things that I've been in the last 10 years, is the key to knowing what it's supposed to do. If it does what it's supposed to do, even if you hate it, it's a good ad.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, and Superbowl ads especially, I don't like ads that are just tons of visual effects and a music track that goes over it and maybe a few on-screen indications of what it's advertising. Because if you're not, directly focusing your attention on the screen, you're doing something else. If you hear dialogue, you hear a voice you recognize, like a celebrity or something, that's going to draw you into the ad if you weren't paying attention to it. But the ones that are just, 5 million things moving around and transitioning into something else and leading you into something else with a music track playing, that doesn't hold any interest for me. I get bored with them, and they're not telling a story, and they're not showing me a celebrity that I want to see.
To your point, I love ads that tell stories. And when I used to work on more ads, I love the fact that we would tell a 30-second story, and it was just 30 seconds, and we only had 30 seconds to do it. That was a constrained thing, but we would tell whole stories, maybe a minute, to tell a longer story. But it was so much fun to think about what that was, and it was so fast and very, you work on it. It's got a short turn, and you're done with it. And it's not like, I have to admit, after working on ads, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to work on another movie.
So the Budweiser spots always try and tell a story without any dialogue at all, and that's right. They're the only ones that have really been successful, I think.
Yeah, Ken.
But see, that's the thing, Courtney. When you say the Budweiser ads, now that was the sponsor, and all of us have had an occasion where we say, "Boy, did you see that ad? It was great. There was this," and I don't remember who it was that they were talking about.
Well,
that's the problem. If you can't understand the sponsor's name, it doesn't matter how good the ad is otherwise.
Well, and how many products have Clydesdales as there?
I know that's the thing, is that is what is it, 30 some years or 40 years of branding. I mean, that gives you back to what Bill was talking about, is 40. Like, I wouldn't know who it was if I hadn't watched the Super Bowl for the last X number of years, that I wouldn't, it would be a random ad that might not make sense, but that says a lot to consistency, of just, you're going to do something like Budweiser does something, but it's going to include those Clydesdales somewhere, because it's going to pull, or it's going to have the little bottles running around for Bud Light. Bud Light is the bottles playing against each other. Go ahead. We're going to go to the last question here, because I got a heart out. Next question.
Idris Haggy in Fairfax, Virginia says, why do you buy good quality USB-C cables? What USB-C? Where? Do you buy good quality USB-C cables? What USB-C and USB-C to HDMI?
Go ahead, Jason.
The very best USB-C cables are OWC's Thunderbolt 4 cables. They are the only thing that you can standardize and will work under every single scenario, including 100 watts of power delivery, which is the spec for USB-C PD.
Yeah, and I use the Uni cables that I get from Amazon, and I have lots of them. So that's the only other ones that I've used. I haven't used the OWC ones just because I didn't know they made cables. So I buy other things from OWC. They're all great. So I'm sure that they're good. So I'll have to follow up on Jason's recommendation. All right. And that was a fun ride. It was like, well, we're not going to have enough questions. Oh no, we have too many questions. So that's as usual. So well done to our producers. Thanks for coming up and filling in and making sure we had a conversation to have. Thanks to the producers for a great conversation. We covered a lot of ground in the last hour. At first, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be worth it, but it was good. Turned into a little bit of a philosophical chat. So very good. Tomorrow we'll talk about the graphics. So come back and we'll do that. And right now we'll jump into After Hours. Thanks.